All right, brother, you may be the mayor of this here podcast, but I am the goddamn sheriff. All right, let's talk about Eddington today.
I can't wait to get all the costumes. Like this is you've done this like twice. It was like did basic sunglasses, and now you're kind of kitting out. So like the obligation is now on you to basically find something for every movie we see. So no pressure on that going
Well,
forward.
for the viewers at home who haven't paid that much attention to little old me, but like I work in film and TV doing props and set deck. So at the end of like Umbrella Academy, I got a whole bunch of police bulletproof vests and sheriff badges. And I was like, oh, where did I store that? And of course, it's in my storage locker across town. But I was really thinking like I'll drive an hour just to have the sheriff vest on top of this. But I was like, it's not going to pan out as well as I think it will. So I could have gone further, which is crazy.
Well, I mean, like again, I'm back. I've worn this before on the pod, but we went to see The Surfer today, so I have
Oh,
my face-off shorts and my Nick Cage outfit on. And this dude came up to me, and he came from behind. So like the face-off shorts are the face-off John Travolta, Nick Cage, but they're double-sided, so it's like front and back. This dude came
yeah.
from behind me and only saw the back and asked. He basically asked to take a picture of my ass. He was like, "Can I take is that face off?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Can I take a picture?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I turned around to face him, and he's like, "Oh, they're at the front too." So I'm like, I think that guy just asked me for a picture of my ass, which, you know what? I've never been asked before. I took it as a high honor. But yes, mine's not at all very thematic, but at least for today's episode. But yes, you
Well,
mentioned we're
it's not
talking
thematic
about
because you were
Eddington.
at Fantasia Fest. Do you want to plug
Yes,
that at all? I mean, we got a
deep
lot of
in it.
content, but
Yeah, it's going to be coming. I've been just trying to keep up with everything right now and kind of transitioning to my professional work time off, so I can cover Fantasia. But yeah, like if you're hearing this on the Tuesday, make sure you're glued to our socials. I'm going to do quick reviews. We're going to try getting some written stuff out as well. And then we'll see on the podcast side, just trying to give some recap and what you might have missed and some of the things that are worth talking about. And just funny little anecdotes, because there's already been a few little adventures on this that's already happened. And we're like 4 days into the, 17-day long festival. So
I do
plenty
like
of
how
stuff to come.
I do really like how our social media feed is going to go from the most like popcorny like Superman to this very political movie to the most indie art house like festival heavy stuff and more. But like it's such a I was
It's
saying like
the
July's going to be
genre
like
film festival, yeah.
yeah super
We cover
super
everything. We
Superman.
love everything, to varying degrees. But I guess let's kick off with this Eddington discussion, because one thing I will say out of the gate is that Ari Aster movies, the last two have been, nearly 3 hours. This one was 2.5 hours. And they're the only kind of movies I feel like require conversations after the movie that are at least twice as long as the movies themselves.
Well
I
put.
think I think for this one, we'll try not to be here for 5 hours, but we'll see where the conversation flows. But for me, I can't. I'm a net positive on this movie, and I'm still in the kind of processing stage. And I've seen this at the time of recording, like 3 days ago now, and I really want to see it again, just to kind of have that experience and just kind of check these things that I've thought about. And have since, like, I've been reading other people's thoughts and feelings and impressions on everything. So just doing my best to kind of get through all of that, because it is a lot to unpack, and we'll do our best here. But I think it's worth a watch. Ari Aster, to me, even though I didn't like Beau is Afraid, he's one of the most interesting filmmakers to me working. For like all of the good, for all of the bad, he's a discourse machine with his movies, and I find that really interesting in an era where everything feels maybe simplistic or too clear and cut and dry. Like, these are the kinds of divisive movies that I find really interesting to think about and talk about, for how they kind of interact with people and how people interact and accept them. So I think it's worth your time. But I say that knowing you could possibly really hate this movie, and we'll get into why. But that's kind of my initial takeaways. I'm curious where you fall on this one, Brandon.
Where do you think I fall on it? See, ladies and gentlemen,
honestly,
that's a divisive
I don't know.
question. That's how you spark discourse. Because here's my thing. We were gonna talk about like the general overview, and then like would you recommend it? And I think what I hate about I love talking about this movie, as you'll come to find, but I think it's such a hard recommend for anybody. This is the most politically homeless movie, because if I recommend this to my dad, who's very much more in the camp of, say, the sheriff, he's going to be a lot more offended that I thought he was a nut job. If I recommend this to my university art school friends, about they're also going to be offended too, because they will find it's like poking fun at how they acted during the pandemic. So this movie, without my general thoughts, the movie doesn't really.
Though, that's exactly why this movie I think exists.
Oh yeah,
exactly
100%.
For that reason you're talking about. But go ahead. I just wanted to get that out.
No, it's good, because I do think that is the biggest strength and weakness for this, and like I guess we'll get into it, but it's a very in the middle movie. It discusses the pandemic, and it showcases, I think, one of the most honest showcasings of the pandemic, not necessarily like the virus itself, but just how people are. And I think one of the greatest ways to phrase it is it shows how people talked and still continue to talk. The way that people are now, I feel, is kind of in this boat where everything is a little bit more like, where do you draw your line? And this is a very much a Western in 2020, May of 2020, as per the standoff here. And as I think general thoughts, I don't know what to make of it. I saw it a day earlier than you, and I still am processing it. A lot of great comedy in it at others' expense. And then, and that's the case with all the jokes, because I was going to say, no matter what side, as if there was two, there's multiple sides to this. No matter where you stand, this movie will kind of offend you and make you laugh one way or the other. And it's a hard recommendation. I think I could only recommend it to maybe you. But like I said, if I had, art friends in college, they would love it then hate it. And if I recommended it to my dad, he would hate it then love it then hate it again. So, I don't know where this movie stands with most people, but for me, I found it, more impressive that somebody tried tackling this. And I guess to summarize, this does cover the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that we're like 5 minutes in, I can say the full thing. I do find that when I left the movie, I was really disturbed, honestly. I felt like I was revisiting something I hadn't processed yet. And it made me look up when the first like dramatic 9/11 movie came out, and it was like 5 years after 9/11 when they had, was it Flight 93 or something, and I really feel like this is that, where it took 5 years for us to have a dramatization in that time period to reflect that time period, because I didn't feel like I was ready for this. It reminded me a lot of how I felt watching The Florida Project, a movie that is really technically well made and tells this really human story. However, the subject matter, to me personally, I was like, damn, I didn't realize I was still processing that. I didn't realize what it was like as a child growing up in a motel for like a year of my life. And then I watched that movie back, and I'm like, I was so innocent, naive, not to realize how sad it was. And this is kind of the pandemic. I think a lot of us started it in May 2020 being like, oh, cool, a month off work, get your toilet paper, play Among Us. And, looking back now, it's like those were kind of like the glory days. And then it kind of took a steep turn down that winding road that now everyone's a lot more politically divisive. And without me saying more, I think that's all I can really say is it's a freaking wild movie, and I don't really know where I stand or where the movie stands with me, and it's a hard recommendation.
Well, let's unpack it together, and we'll revisit the question at the end, I think, because, like, yes, I'll say my initial takeaway, and for anyone that hasn't seen it and wants to steer clear of spoilers, now's the time to check out, come back and listen, because I feel like we have a lot to cover with this one, and I feel you'll feel the same way once you see it. But so yeah, full bore on spoilers now, but I'll just say, like, kind of how as soon as it ended, how I was feeling. And that was definitely overwhelmed, because there is so much going on here. And like, it's just one of those things, like, it's a movie that I don't think can be fully understood or appreciated in the time that you watch it. Like again, you need to sit with it, you need to talk about it, you need to read what other people are saying about it. Like, it's one of those kinds of movies. And there's so many layers to this, and the characters and the plot and the story and everything that really goes on here. And I really want to avoid making this sort of like a recap. Like, the assumption is, if you're listening, like you've seen the movie and you want to kind of hear and dive into some of these themes. And one of the things you said, like, that I kind of jumped in on was the idea of people, and I honestly, the term I think people use these days is you're telling on yourself. Like, for people that felt like, oh, this was both sidesing it and it was too much on, like, they were too human to the other thing, I'm like, you're telling on yourself because you're identifying that you fall in to one of the many variations of, like, right-wing people, liberal people, broadly speaking, that this movie sort of showcases. And there's
It's
layers,
very politically homeless, which is a very hard thing to do.
but like and okay, so this I wanna dive in on this. So one of the things I immediately started thinking about was Civil War. And the thing, well, not to dive into that, but that movie went so far out of its own way to not make any political comment, right? Like, it was, they refer to events with titles that are vague, so it could be either or. Like, it was the Antifa massacre. Like, they could have been the ones massacred or the ones carrying out the massacre. It really, really did try to be, as broad as possible and dodge any, like, it was California and Texas that were teaming up, right? Like, they did a lot to get out of this. And what I think this movie does well is that none of these characters are, like, obviously perfect or good or not flawed or something in some way. And so you have kind of the beginning of this unfurling where, like, it's not unreasonable for Joaquin Phoenix to feel sympathy for this old man that they're not letting go to the grocery store. And then at the flip side, you have the people wearing masks that are like, there's, like, the argument basically is effectively that, like, you have people that are almost too eager to be bullying and cheering the kind of othering of their neighbors, rightfully or wrongly. The movie does not care how you feel about that, but it demonstrates that that's what's happening. And then you have people that may have good intentions here but have problems over there, or they're masking other things. And I feel like this movie doesn't dance around any of the kind of politics. I feel like
if I can
all
jump
of these
in on
characters were part of that, and I think that is really where this movie isn't both sidesing. It's really just kind of showcasing all of it. And if you too strongly identify with a group, that's what I mean about the you're telling on yourself part, because you should see good and bad, at least partially and to varying degrees, in all the characters in all of those characters.
I think you said it really well, and I did want to go back to your Civil War comment, because that movie avoids being like taking a side or taking a shot at a side, where this movie is the opposite. It is shooting both directions all times. Like the Civil War equivalent would have been like, they list a bunch of stuff that the Allied forces did, and then they list a bunch of stuff that corrupt government did. That's this movie, where it's a back and forth of like, look how crazy they are, look how corrupt they are, and then it flips it, and it's like almost every 5 minutes that whenever you're getting on board with whoever's anti-mask, you're like, what a nut job. Whenever you're like, yeah, Pedro is a good guy, then he's kind of a shitty dad. He's hoarding toilet paper in his living room, and he's abusing power for the fun of it. And I think power is a great theme that they explore, because it's the sheriff struggling to keep power, the mayor, the companies, the corporations, the people in the grocery store, the like you said, they kind of mob justice the guy out of the store, and it's almost like you see that little bit of power of telling people what to do, and the group mentality. And yeah, I know we're too close to start talking about mob mentality and the COVID stuff, but like, yeah, truly, it doesn't hold any punches. So like, I kind of agree with you. I think this is like the antithesis of Civil War, where instead of it's apolitical by going so hard both ways, where it's not just kind of like holding punches. It does, I think, really lampoon both of the main political spectrums, but even lampoons other sides of it, like the Austin Butler stuff.
The both ways side of this is like, it's and I've seen it, I've said it in my conversations about the movie too, but it's really not two sides, right? Like even on like there's different groupings, right? There's Joaquin Phoenix's character and then his mother-in-law, right? Who are maybe in the kind of left right spectrum broadly lumped together, but she is like so much further down this rabbit hole and is so much like I feel like it's safe to say like even weirder and just like just a bizarre of a person. And but like they're loosely associated, but like to me it's like it goes like omnidirectional, like it goes out at everybody. And on like the left you have, you know, the mayor who's like following the rules, and like the relatively nice presenting guy that is hosting parties at his house where social distancing is not being respected.
The safety theater of like the temperature checks being a complete farce, and
exactly. And like he is like when they're debating this thing, like he's just a kind of the corrupt servant to power, and like it's all about posturing, and like he weaponizes his wife that disappeared in odd circumstances too that the movie really doesn't engage with, but like he weaponized one day when my wife just left my son and I in a political ad, and you know like there's all of these things about him that are like kind of wildly unlikable. And on the other part of the liberal side too is and it was one of my favorite arcs just because like it's closer to our age demographics, was the performative liberalism going on.
Oh my god,
you know, like the whole, because obviously like it's crazy. Like I was laughing thinking about this, like if this came out in the heyday, like this would be the most unmonetizable movie you could ever talk about in the history of anything, because it deals with all of the things that were just nope, that's not being you know, accepted in the discourse. But I think like it wasn't just like, okay, here's this one character that represents the entire broad right wing, and then one character that represents the broad left. And that, to me, is why this is actually a lot more effective, is because it understands the nuance. Like, so few people you could broadly categorize like that. And that's why I feel a lot of the time, and reading some of the comments, like how people were like, oh, they weren't hard enough on insert my political position here. It's like, okay, but the point is to be more self-reflective here, I think. And that's where this, again, kind of screams to me of like, I want to back up a little bit just because it's related to this. The poster for this is buffalo running off a cliff, right? It's like 3 different buffaloes being like, you know, hunted. They're all pushed off a cliff to their doom. They collectively all run that way, fall off and die. And the tagline says, hindsight is 2020. And I think if I can rewind that application to this entire movie, all of the things that go on, the wars between neighborhoods, that this small town of like 2,000 people comes apart at the seams, and whether it's COVID related, Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd angle of this related, like
Black Lives Matter. That's my favorite.
The things come
nuance.
apart at the seams, and ultimately nothing changes. The power brokers that be. What was it? Ultra Gold Magikarp or whatever the
it sounded like a Pokemon.
Data center was named. Yeah, like all of that still happens, and I think that really is the message of like, it's not that, and maybe like I've read takes where they say, okay, yes, they point to the bad parts of like the liberals, but they're definitely demonstrating, and it's true in the movie. In my read of it is like, you know, I can't remember her name in the movie, but the white girl that's in the Black Lives Matter protests that the 2 guys are fighting over, like she is earnestly in there, right? This is somebody that like maybe doesn't fully understand like, you know, the ramifications, but like
she's
feels
horrified that she's a white, you know, privileged girl.
But she feels like something is wrong, and she wants to do something about it. Like that core base is true, where there's the other characters that are touting that stuff but are completely inauthentic about it. She is at least authentic about it. But then on the right, like that's where most of the political the violence comes from in the movie, in Joaquin's character, right? So it's
that
I
went
don't
right
think
over
it's
my head.
Well, I don't think it's equating like
Yeah.
some people are saying. Like it's saying that like you're not perfect. It's not equating to say you're not perfect, right? Like if you're like you're not as bad just because you ran a stop sign and didn't hurt anybody. You made a mistake, but you're not a serial killer. So it's not to say that like, there's a difference, and just by pointing out, well, Brandon ran a stop sign, that doesn't mean you're just as bad as a serial killer. And so I think like the layers and the nuance to that, I think, is what is like ironically what is so needed, but like you said, is so willfully misunderstood by the people that arguably need to understand that message the most. And I think that's kind of like the beautiful tragedy of this movie for me, is that like I came away as someone that really didn't, and even throughout the whole kind of pandemic experience, like you could not easily classify me into either side. And as someone that like that went through that and saw people on both sides of this whole thing, I felt like this was such a poignant kind of capture of that moment in time, and the ramifications that ultimately we're still dealing with today. Like you said, it feels very fresh, and it does. And I think like it's kind of highlighting, I guess, at a super high level that a lot of these fights, a lot of these things aren't distractions, in that they're not important. It's not that the issues that are being discussed aren't important, but it's like losing the forest for the trees. While all of this stuff is going on in Eddington, the power brokers, the mayor's like little wacky guy that you thought was his right-hand man is now running, Joaquin's campaign at the end. And like it all is just part of that kind of bigger issue of like power for power's sake, and that we're all down here distracted by maybe important but real issues, but we're so focused on that we're missing the fact of everything else that's going on around us. And so I gotta slow down, because again, there's like trillion things we could go.
7 minutes ago, you brought up how funny the teens were, and I want to go back to that.
Go back.
So I'm just joking, but no, when you said the virtue signaling teens and how like that really hit us, because when you said like, oh, I was on neither side, fact check there, I was on both sides. I was the guy laughing at the guy in Walmart wearing a mask before it was mandated. I was then the guy shaming people for wearing or not wearing masks. I was the guy that got the vaccine and then complained about having it. You know what I mean? I was both, and it was awesome that. And I'll be brave enough to say I was the buffalo running off the hill in my own life. I have so many friends who were both, and going to this movie with an honest reflection on that, and not feeling like saying this on like a little podcast is going to make me some sort of black sheep. But what I wanted to get at was like, this actually relates. It's one of my favorite pieces of filmmaking in this film. All the virtue signaling with the kids and the teens, and like the Black Lives Matters of Eddington kid, and all that. And again, it's all wrapped up in power and social dynamics. Like it's trying to get the girl, not necessarily win the election. But what I do like is my favorite thing is, and this is what you alluded to at the end, it's not about what sides are in control. It's this overall message that there's a bigger, more powerful, more scary thing out there that is realized by the end of the movie. And when they first show their hand at that, it is a zoom in on the black screens on Instagram, and it goes into the black, and it comes out into like a jet plane, and the logo is like the globe with a hand around it, and it's like, is that the global elites that Alex Jones would talk about? Because it never really, I don't know if I'm just silly, but they didn't ever say like that's specifically Antifa or whatever. They alluded to it, but I think the way this movie wraps up, again, we're in the spoiler half of this for a while now, but the way it wraps up is a madman's conspiracies are correct, and that's far worse than them being a crackpot. If you're ever upset with your very radicalized, maybe right-wing family members, imagine the world where they're right. That sucks. Sure, they get to be right, but oh my God, imagine there is this Alex Jones level threat of Air Force One dropping like paratroopers into your town to kidnap a hostage, set up bombs, and light a thing on fire and drone film it to post on social media for rage bait. Like, that is an Ari Aster whirlwind sentence, what I just went on. That went on sentence my English teacher would dock me for. But I just, there's so much I wanted to break down. But yeah, the virtue signaling that you're talking about with the teens is probably the most comedy, and I'm hoping that's where most people can laugh. I do feel like that's the part where my, film school friends may disagree and be like, taking shots at me with their 4 Instagram posts, and one of them still a black square from 2020. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's where I think I would lose some of my friends on that side of the spectrum. And like I said, my dad would probably start this movie off being like, the sheriff car saying that they lied to them is spelling the wrong version of your. That's probably one of my other favorite bits is you're being manipulated. When his wife, Emma Stone, leaves him in the middle of the night, he's leaning against his squad car that has all his propaganda on it. And it says, you're being manipulated, but it's you're, not you are, Yeah. And I was just like, that's a good bit. That is so, like, I love that they paid attention to those details. And again, I said earlier, the Pedro Pascal character, his, like, I would say mostly good perspective of, like, his actions starts shifting when you see he's kind of micromanaging his son's actions if he can or can't hang out with people because it's a bad look for him. And he's got this kind of, like, hate on it. Like, he's a real control freak in his own home. And they allude to his relationship with, like, Emma Stone in the past, where he's like, yeah, then she got pregnant 6 months after I never touched her. You can only imagine what it was like with his wife if he's that controlling over his kid. And there's that ambiguous backstory there that they never really flesh out. But
yeah,
I do really like that, when they see his living room, the crime scene that comes, there is just a ton of, like, Charmin toilet paper in the living room. And typically, and this is something from set dressing world, in a place like the Arctic, you would have, like, toilet paper or, like, Costco-sized snacks in a living room because it's, like, kind of temporary. You don't have the space for it. It's open. It's kind of like a low-end way to dress a house is having all those, like, toiletries out. But and just in real life, you go to my house and see toilet paper in the living room, I probably am in a depressive funk. But in Pedro Pascal's, like, perfect house, there's all this toilet paper in the living room. And again, that's virtue signaling that he is taken care of. He's fine, And I think reminding myself of that time, quick non-movie related COVID story, when all the toilet paper stuff was happening, I went to a Walmart and I hid one behind Barbie Monopoly in the Walmart toy section, a big 24-pack roll. And then a week later, when things got really scary, I went back to buy it because I was like, oh, I got like 10 rolls. I'm a single guy. I don't need that toilet paper. I'll save it for somebody who needs it. But I'm like, what if I need it? But I don't want to buy it. That'd be silly. So I went back to the Barbie aisle. I pulled it out. As I'm walking in the store, people were like speed walking up to me and be like, is it in stock? And I'm like, yeah, aisle 6 or whatever. And I would just keep walking. Well, I got offered me like $35 and it was like a $20 roll of toilet paper.
Bro.
It was insanity. I was living in my own little Beau's Afraid, like, hyper reality. So yeah,
just buy a Tushy, folks. We're not sponsored, but if Tushy wants to sponsor us,
big Tushy's controlling your bowel movements.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess I'm glad. I feel like we've talked pretty broadly about it, and we'll get into maybe more of the ending. But I want to talk, I guess, more specifically, what scenes really worked for you, what really didn't work, character scenes, whatever. Like, was there any big flaws or criticisms?
Honestly, the kind of flaw, if it is that, because it's his movies, especially the last two. I would say exclusively the last two. I don't think this is as true for
last two being Beau's Afraid and
Beau's Afraid and Eddington.
Okay, including
I
Eddington.
feel like those two in particular seem more grouped together in terms of length, but also kind of scope and scale and massive things and a lot going on. And I just, in the last two movies, I just kind of, when it ends, I felt, the worst I felt about the movie was right when it ended. Because I'm just like, I don't see all of this. And this is where, like, I meant, like, it's not the kind of movie that you can just, I feel like, immediately, like, you can do whatever you want. But, like, if you really want to engage with it, I don't feel like it's a movie that works that way. That the moment the credits hit, you can just be like, oh my God, that was, like, you really need to percolate and digest it. And
it's no
and
Superman,
like I said,
2025.
have conversations about it. Like, yeah, exactly. And it's not, and I feel like it just feels so weird because we get so few of these kinds of things anymore. Like, art, it has to be sellable, it has to be able to make money. Like, this is not a kind of movie that I expect to make money. It is like, it has artistic merit for sure. And, like, honestly, as far as direction goes, like, some of this was like some of my favorite stuff, like, from Ari Aster that I've seen. Like, especially one of the big standouts for me was the action sequence, basically that third act, when you say all that stuff happens and the explosions and the guns and even just like the panning shots as all of that is unfolding. Like, I really dug that, and it kind of made me like, oh, Ari's got some action movie chops in here that I really was like enjoying. And you know, aside from the context, obviously, in which all that's happening, which again, like, to me, like, it's typical of him to have just this dial shift. And you talked about already kind of like this idea, and we'll dig into that more specifically later, but yeah, like, it's just, it accelerates, and I feel like because it just goes so berserk at the last, say, 30 minutes, and then really kind of ends in such a, again, super bizarre, weird way, you just kind of, the credits hit and you're like, what the fuck? Like, it just, you know, comes over, because the first, I feel like 2 hours of the movie more or less feel like within the same ballpark, and I'm kind of was on board, and then it just dials to 11. And so, like, I don't know if there is I intentionally don't use the word better, because I don't necessarily think that this is, but like, is there a more concise or clear way to kind of really tackle the points and the themes that he's talking about in a way that immediately does feel more unifying? Or is that impossible too? Like, I don't know, right? That's kind of the question. And so, like, I do, like, almost wish, as like, even from like from a basic ass simpleton's perspective like me, I'm just like, I wish I really, as soon as that movie ended, I was like, I get it. And I get it. And I didn't. And I, like I said, like, I had ideas and I was on a lot of things, but again, it's like, I really do want to watch it again. I really picked up a lot from reading and listening to other people talk about the movie. But then also, like, shored up things that I thought about it. And I just wish, like, it just kind of bums me out that, like, I know a lot of people won't see it because it's harder to engage with. It is not like, you know, if you grew up and all you saw is, again, like those kids, like you mentioned last week about 15-year-olds, that this is their first Superman in theaters, which just scared the shit out of me. I felt disgusted by that.
Yeah, you're so quiet in the clip when I was like, I want to make you question your mortality. You were like,
I was doing the stare off meme of, like, I was processing the timeline and the numbers were circling through my head.
Then I hit you that, like, Love Island thing, and you went like, nope.
You flipped me out of that. But, like, for people that have grown up in the modern era of movies where it's big, huge budgets, superheroes, all of this is just like a movie that, if that's all you've kind of consumed, you would be like, and I don't mean like, it's not because you're an idiot or anything like that. It's just, you've never seen anything like this. And I feel like its inaccessibility is a problem. Like, I wish, like you said, I wish you could recommend it to more people. Like, I wish I could trust that, like, oh yeah, it's really worth it. Like, there's a lot in here that's interesting and compelling. And even if it's hard, like, sometimes art should be hard to engage with. It's not just about feeling good. And so, like, in some parts, like, I just wish it was more accessible. But then maybe too, it wouldn't be what it is. And that's probably more important in the long run. So
I like how
that's a super long-winded way to give you that, but there you go.
Well, I was going to say, I like how that started with me saying, what was the highlight of the movie for you? I wish it was more accessible.
Well,
no,
like,
I know what you mean, but
you're gaslighting me. No. No, like, it's long and it's overstuffed. Maybe that's a better way to say it. Like, it is absolutely stuffed with themes, messages, stories, like allusions, metaphor. Like, it is loaded with stuff. So even, again, like, in one watch, I just felt overwhelmed, and that's maybe what I mean more as a clear way to say that.
Like,
is
something
that, like,
you didn't love about it was
because I felt Beau Afraid. This was better than Beau is Afraid, in my opinion. But the problem I had with Beau is Afraid is I felt like that we just had like three entirely different movies just happen sequentially.
Yeah, it was separated by mild panic attacks when you're watching it. You know,
and
like,
then a crazy dial up. Yeah, exactly. And then a crazy dial up where he's fighting a giant dick and balls in an attic, and then gets put on trial for being mean to his mom. Like, one of the wildest bits in that. But this worked for me. It felt more cohesive, but it just felt like overstuffed. Like, I feel like I would have loved to have seen the Beau is Afraid trilogy, of like
Yeah.
that first movie of him in his apartment and all of this, and then the next movie of like him in their house, and then the next movie in the woods. Like it felt like three wildly different things, but all jammed together. So then when I'm done, I'm like, what the fuck? Like I just feel
I do think
overwhelmed.
I do think like this movie, you know, like I was trying to like it's funny too because Austin Butler's character, which I think I want to segue to talk about,
Sure.
comes and goes pretty damn quick. But I think he hit me with my own letterboxisms in mid movie because the whole time from the start of the movie to the end of it, I was trying to think how do I quantify what I'm watching. For a while, I was like, I hope they play this in civics class in 2040 when they discuss the great shift in culture or whatever. I don't know.
Mhm.
And when Austin Butler is talking to, I almost called him Bo, to the sheriff, and he's like, yeah, you know, because you don't understand it, you try to put it in a box, man. And he's definitely like a big riff on Russell Brand, you know, just like the tattoos, the very like alt-right kind of like I'm just a chill every guy, man, but we got to watch out for what the other side's doing, and very
Right.
culty and charismatic. But what I wanted to say about that was he kind of hit me with that because I can't understand this movie at times, and I think when you said it's so full in my 500 IQ brain here, I think there's a world where people edit this movie into what they wanted it to be because there's so much material. So if you're very one way or the other, I feel like you could edit this down, cut some crucial scenes where Pedro is being an asshole to his son and talking about the SA allegations, you know what I mean? Edit that out, and he's a martyr for justice. You edit out
Yeah.
the teens in some of these scenes, or you edit those riot scenes a little differently. It's very clearly a different movie. I do think everything again. While we're still on the broadness of this, you could cut this movie almost any way you like it because there's so much in here. You could even cut like the middle second act of this whole movie, and just go from that first act to when he assassinates Pedro Pascal, and then cut like another 30 minutes to when shit's going down. The cop escapes jail. There's the explosions, the drones. You know what I mean? I think you could cut this into like a John Rambo-esque edit if you were really like a memer, and then you put that out, being like, I can't believe Ari Aster, you know, took this, you know, right-wing approach, or you know what I mean? So I do think it's really fascinating that they kept so much, and it was so intentional. Like even the poster, when you talked about the Buffalo thing, I'm like, far more insightful. I was going to say, the guy's got a big machine gun. When the hell is that happening? And sure enough, like almost 2 hours in, he comes out with it, and it is like loud and thumping. And
Yeah.
I like when the only good character, the Native Reserve police officer, who's the cop, who's the good one, because there's not a lot of good ones. He shows up to save the day, and he gets his whole leg blown off by the M60 machine gun. Sorry, I want to talk about Austin Butler and Emma Stone because I think those were low points for me. They were kind of cameos in this movie. Emma Stone's character had no agency. She was more to show Beau Afraid's demise as the sheriff, to amp him up, and just also kind of a plot point for him to have a beef with Pedro. You mentioned earlier when Pedro was like, my wife mysteriously disappeared. It's almost mirrored in a very sickly, less refined way when the sheriff on live stream talks about her troubled past and all that. It is a very fly-by-wire movie where it's like you can see the gears turning in real time for the sheriff when he's like, how do I stay relevant? How do I do this? Because he's not a social media guy. Like, again, that's half the jokes, that he's a boomer on Facebook trying to say his piece, getting some validation
Thank you
online.
very much, or whatever it is.
Yeah. He's like, I'm gonna run for mayor, and he talks like Beau is afraid a little bit, and even the ending, like the asthmatic sound mix of his breathing, like it was masterful filmmaking through and through. And I'm just mad, like you said, it's in a movie that's so hard to recommend because it is well done, but just so much of it, and it's so anyways, what would you think of like the Austin Butler of it all? What'd you think of
I think the difficulty is for me there is that like Austin Butler to a slightly less degree, but Emma Stone's character to me is as limited as she is in the movie, she is incredibly essential to the main arcs of the story for Joe, for Joaquin Phoenix's character, the sheriff. And I think because like that's really kind of it's definitely more of like a narrative device, but to a lot of degrees that's what supporting characters really are a function of, just in movies in general. But like in terms of the agent, like you said, like Emma Stone had no agency. Absolutely, but I think that's like part of the trauma of the character. Like that's intentionally what it is. So without getting like I don't want to absolutely destroy us, but like there are accusations made by Joe and Emma Stone's mother-in-law or mom, Joe's mother-in-law, about the like Brandon said, relationship with the mayor from years ago, and I don't even have to say what it is, but then what the reality is that it was actually her father that did that stuff to her. That's the real, like, that's the kind of relevance. So they don't show that. They don't explicitly. He swipes away before it gets to that part in her little video where she says, like, my husband's alive.
Man.
But that's the implication of
Right
that
over
whole
my
thing.
head.
But that's like,
Completely over my
and it's
head.
not because, and this is what's kind of like bums me out again, is like, it's not because you're an idiot. It's not like anything like that. It's that
Gosh,
you
thank you,
missed
Paul.
one. Yeah, you missed one thing in a movie with a trillion things, you know? But, like, that is kind of the whole issue. So then, because of this, like, her mother constantly pushing this lie, and then Joe really pushing the lie in an incredibly public forum for his own political gain, that's the breaking point for her. And so instead of, like, again, like she's been like her mom made, I guess they allude to this big scene and all this drama that her mom caused about the mayor and all this stuff, like when that happened. So like she's weaponized her trauma that and her mother has, and has taken control of that narrative and that story and what happened, and in such a negative way made that so much harder. And so like I think, you know, there was an incredibly important part of that, you know, as it relates to Joe. But at the same time, they also represent like different functions. Like when I said the binary doesn't work, like they're different directions that we were kind of talking about. Like you were saying, like someone that has no agency, whose trauma is weaponized by the two people closest to them for their own needs or to deny the reality of what happened. Of course it makes sense that she goes in the league with this charismatic, handsome, cult-looking guy promising like all of those things, right? That your pain is not a coincidence. And I think like all of that serves this different rabbit hole. And this is where the story is so like COVID is kind of the timeline, but what the movie itself to me was indicative of was that COVID was the inciting incident. It was the thing that broke the dam. In that we all were kind of bubbling, right? We were all in our own little bubbles, well, on social media and online and whatever. And then you remove the human connection of like going to work or going out with friends or, you know, seeing other human beings that you don't immediately live with.
And pressure on stuff that was already frail, like who can go where,
and then
and
you do that, so everyone just further deepens into their own rabbit holes, and then it implodes, right? And that really is like COVID was just like, this is what the thing that broke it, but the movie ultimately is about that fraction of society, of people, of the loss of community, and how like even in something like as big and diverse as a city like LA or New York or what have you, that a small town of 2,000 people like in the desert can go through that same exact sort of thing and through the same methods. And then that the ultimate thing is that like we're so divided, we're so fighting that, you know, and everyone goes in a different rabbit hole, right? Like you and I, for example, like how we identified as like we didn't fall into either kind of one of the generic binaries that people use, but we still kind of pigeonholed out whether it's the better position, like who cares, like I'm not even gonna flirt with that. But we went one direction, some people went another direction, and that's where it's like Joe goes in a little bit, Joe's mother-in-law goes way deep, right?
Until
and,
he's
like,
beyond her and
off.
she's like, it's too much, and it keeps popping off at the end when she's like,
well,
I'm
and then
out.
she's taking control of the whole thing too at the end, which is a whole other bit. But yeah, like as far as to really bring it back to that, like they just represent more of the pathways that led to the fracture. And again, like someone like Emma Stone's character, who is I want to say like the only, maybe not the only, but like off the top of my head, like the most innocent character in the movie that like does nothing wrong, is just struggling with this trauma and like absolutely abandoned, if like, you know, like let down or maliciously put down by the people closest to her, that she goes down a rabbit hole too.
Yeah.
And Austin Butler representing like again one of those facets of where people can go. It's not just like political talk radio. There's something a little more here,
Like a
that speaks to that.
spiritual
Right.
predator almost he is. I found it
Exactly.
was
And so like
um
I understand like, and it's definitely a super valid criticism if you feel like, you know, like they're not around enough. And again, in a movie that is loaded
yeah.
with stuff, I totally like, I'm sympathetic, because like, did we really need like another layer? But the more I think about that reflection myself, the more I think is what to me makes the movie work, because it's not just like, well, either you went down the conspiracy rabbit hole like Joe and his mother-in-law, or you were like a performative lib serving power, right? Like
Yeah.
if you just classified the movie into that, then everyone's pissed off. You're not making any meaningful contribution to the conversation or to the narrative or, you know, the broader society. So I feel like as much as it is another thing, I think it's partially again because it doesn't just basic, you had one or the other. I really feel like that serves the ultimate message of the movie a lot more.
I do think like I want to talk about a character relating to that. I want to talk about a character that has more screen time and probably more story or as much story impact as Austin Butler. It's the unnamed homeless guy. I think
Yeah.
his contribution as like a character in this movie is great. It's obviously the stand-in for, I don't know, maybe homeless in real life, but also like the people in general. Like the movie starts with, you know, the sheriff kind of debating with the mayor who's using the bar as a town hall meeting and being exclusionary and wielding that power. And at first you're like, oh, I get it. You know, it's the rules. It's, you know, but you know, he ultimately, the sheriff has to essentially fight the homeless guy in the bar, and it kicks his, he's sore and he's beat up, and that footage resurfaces later as police brutality.
Yeah.
Everything kind of comes back for the most part, unless you're Emma Stone. I don't know, I guess she comes back. Anyways, but the point is yeah, the homeless guy I thought was really fun, especially when you talk about the virtue signaling youth, where Joaquin Phoenix is like, you better be gone in 5 minutes when I get back here. They're timing it, and then the homeless guy shows up, and he's like, he's trying to bum cigarettes off them or whatever, and they disband because they don't want to deal with the homeless guy. They hear about all this injustice and community. Meanwhile, the homeless guy is the only reason why they stop protesting and leave. And again, this movie starts with the homeless guy kind of being this problem that nobody wants to deal with. And then later when he's at and so he's in all these bits, right? But then when the movie really, really boils over, and I want to get into this because my favorite scenes are around this moment. I'd say the ending felt like a stretched out version of this, but I'm going to call it the firework scene. It was with Katy Perry's Fireworks playing, and the sheriff gets the noise complaint. He has to go deal with it. He shows up. That's when they say all the performative, you know, it's like clearly a gathering of like 100 people on a private property, which was super illegal for a lot of places. There's the temperature
When they even
checker
have
guy.
the signage, right? 6 feet apart, but then they get into the
nobody's
party and
6 feet
everyone's
apart.
together.
Yeah, they're playing his wife's like essay, you know, apology or denouncil video on a screen. Like it was really, honestly, that was the first point of the movie where I'm like, is there some grand higher power Illuminati running the country or running this town? Because that was like real, like almost like, was it like Bohemian Grove, but for New Mexico, you know? But they're playing Firework on the loudspeaker, and he comes up, and he unplugs it, and he's on his way out, getting masterfully, you know, edited, the good sound mix, the tension when it plugs back in, and then when he goes, he screams, "Turn it down!" And Pedro slaps him, and he slaps him again. I was like, something's about to happen, because this whole movie, up until that point, the pressure is building, and it's all this commentary and all these moments, and you feel like it's telling you something or reflecting something about what you've experienced. And that's the moment where like, oh, the dramatic narrative is about to really pop off. And it does, because Pedro leaves silently, like big, ominous vibe. Pedro. Yeah. Joaquin, sorry. Joaquin. Joaquin leaves the party, very ominously, silently. Party keeps going. Nothing, again, indicative of the finale and everything. nothing changes. People are getting away with it. The sheriff who thinks he's in the right is completely left on his own, and he goes down to the bar and he sees the homeless guy's broken in again. He's drinking all the liquor. He's saying some crazy rhetoric, which I felt like was gonna be more explained for my simpleton brain, that it was like something to do with the Austin Butler predator sex cult thing. Anyways, but the point is, he blows that guy away, and then he dumps the body, and then he assassinates Pedro with like a rifle shot like 800 meters away or something through the.
It is a wicked shot.
Wicked shot. Oh, dude, and especially when he kills his little shit son. There's no good characters in this movie. Like, I think they like morally good. They're all well written, but I mean, like, it's hard to attach yourself to anybody in this movie because everyone kind of is the worst person in all these situations. Nobody's fully redeemable. I'm trying to think, like I said, like maybe the native detective guy who's by the books, he's good, but he gets not a good ending. I mean, he gets a mural, which again is performative of what actually happens. But yeah, I love that segment, the fireworks segment, when it sets this rage off. And again, the best homeless guy is that best needle drop. Katy Perry fireworks in 2025's Eddington. But yeah, with the homeless guy, I think was like such a great character to have to reflect so much of essentially like the real problem, like the one homeless guy in a town of 2,000 who's being completely ignored and shunned, and nobody cares. Like, right wing, left wing, the homeless guy is on no one's agenda. And I really think it's funny that he was the only guy that maybe had the virus, and Joaquin maybe got it. Yeah, the virus is nowhere in this movie. It is just a plot device. It's like the unseen MacGuffin, and I like a lot of that. But
well, the homeless guy is super interesting because in all of the videos, and like I've not thought about a movie or read or watched about a movie this much in a while, and it's because, like I said, super interested what everyone's hearing. This is ironically, I think, one of the things that is getting like zero discussion. A lot of things tackling the ending, and probably indicative of the fact that there is a trillion things you can talk about in this movie. But that to me was also kind of like one of the ever-present bits of like, these are people that, like, again, Joe has, at least to some degree at the outset of the movie, positive emotions. Like, I did not feel good watching that old man get pushed around and whatever, and like, especially in the context of today, where we really know that like the only person he was putting at risk effectively was himself, and if that's his prerogative, that's whatever. But like, it shouldn't, regardless of if like that situation, you should not be like applauding like everyone in the grocery store did when these two people pushed this guy out of the store.
And it was like that. Like, that was how society was. Like I said, I laughed at the guy wearing the mask in April, but by May, I was shunning the anti-masker. And my girlfriend and I would go, anti-masker. Because you'd be like, I can't believe they're so rebellious. The guy with the tattoo sleeve and the pit bull in the Walmart, oh my God. Well, and after a while, I was like, I don't fault him, so I get it.
Well, that became kind of the thing of like, so like him being uncomfortable with that is a good thing. And then like at the same time, and he is
asthmatic. He did have a medical reason. Let's not forget.
Well, yeah, that was a whole other component of that, which was like, again, just another layer in that
too
whole
many layers,
kind of like thing. But with the homeless guy, like, again, like, it's just the thing that like gets so ignored through the whole time, that like, as disturbed as Joe was by watching this old man get thrown out of a store, he didn't care at all about the homeless guy. It's like, what's the problem? I don't even understand. Like, he walks right past the guy clearly banging on the door, and to go to the window to ask, what do you want? What's the problem? And like kind of have an altercation there, but it's that he's more motivated by that than he is that. And so that ultimately that character, and like you said, at the Black Lives Matter protests, their activism doesn't get dispersed. They don't disperse because the cops ask them to. They disperse because they'd just rather not deal with a homeless guy. He's kind of making me feel weird. So let's just call the protest here, guys, and we'll split off, right?
I do really... I do want to say with that part with the activism and the riot too, there's many turning points with my feelings on Joaquin's character in the movie. But when he goes to engage with the riot and he's carrying a selfie stick with the ring light on it, I was like, this is going to go so bad, and it shows that he's more focused on getting views and being viewed than the kids. Like I kept thinking it was a baton. I'm like, that's a selfie stick with
Yeah.
the tripod and the light. And yeah, again, I just thought I was like that whole scene had me so tense because again that I just wish Kylie Jenner would show up with a Pepsi. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
Heal
just wanted
the
that
world
scene,
by giving them a Pepsi, dude.
I wanted A Train from the Boys to show up with the Turbo Rush energy drinks. Do that. But yeah, sorry to cut you off. But yeah, I just had to mention the selfie stick was a real moment where I was like, this is his character is definitely going on. And the scene right after is when he outs his wife on the live stream with like 12 people in the diner. For 12 people in the diner and some Facebook, like very boomer move to like put down your wife for a little bit of clickbait. So
yeah. Well, and that's like, I think, I mean, that's indicative of like the descent and the split and the fixation. Like everyone's going deeper in and deeper in. The more you're dug in, the harder it is to kind of dig out. And I think like to kind of wrap the homeless guy component of this is that like, yeah, he's just kind of ever present, and no one cares as much as they care about all these other things going on. No one cares about him, and then his fate is to be sealed by Joaquin in a fit of rage, right?
Yeah,
and that like for whatever kind of political statement that I feel like is pretty self-explanatory and stands on its own of like, we don't care, and then when we're ready to give the brunt of something, that's where the brunt of things go. Like
the real victims of society, the housing challenge,
are the people that are like the ones that kind of also get just shunned out of it, right? Like I said, like rightful causes. It's not that like any of these things are right or wrong. The movie's not commentating on that, but it's like there's just like there's a human. It's right in front of you. It is here, and you don't care, or you ignore it, or it's too weird and you awkward, and it's easier to do all these other things. So like I did find that like to me was genuinely one of the saddest like heartbreaking parts of this movie was just kind of like the more that went on, like it was like it starts off as like just this like kind of muttering like weird kind of bit, and it tracks with him, and then just the more he's ever present, it's just how he's like in all of this, surrounded by people that care about something,
Yeah.
And no one cares about that, and that's really
he lost everything.
Like,
he lost the bar. He lost his ability to loiter in public. Like he lost it all, and then his life. I did want to like reshape this talk again about like the turning point I was saying with Joaquin where he goes nuts. I think I was rooting for him almost the entire time. Like I think for most of the movie, I wanted to see him progress like as a character. I wanted to see him get his nut, so to speak. But I think the point where I was like,
it's an odd one to say considering he was trying to have a baby too.
True, very true. But no, what? I forgot about that completely, and now the ending is like even more crippling, even though it was already crippling, but literally crippling. So, but the whole thing I was going to say though was, I think the turning point I had where I was like, ooh, okay, there are no good characters, but he's the main guy that I'm supposed to root for, right? We start in the movie with his perspective. But when he starts to try to frame the black officer who's been a really loyal friend, an officer who didn't get caught up in the politics, who's just trying to do his job. It was a heartbreaking scene when he's on the phone calling like his uncle to be like, I'm locked up. They're planning, and they are planning the evidence, and it's dicey. You see that I have chills thinking about it. They have like the native officer check his car, and like it's really sad. And he trusts the chief. He's like, I don't trust you. His name's like Guy. I don't trust you, Guy, but I trust the sheriff. And it's sad because he's a bit of a mentor in a weird way, like, and he promotes him without the racial like clout, which it was a thing he would have done had he known about the situation the day prior. But I think that was the moment where I was like, ooh, we are definitively rooting for the bad guy. And the only reason why we kind of stay with him or stay in his point of view or stay kind of hoping he gets what he wants out of this story is because he's kind of right in the sense where we are being manipulated. There is a bigger, badder power than him giving into those negative cycles of hate or whatever. And I do like, again, Guy is probably one of my like more enjoyable, like shittier side characters. He's tertiary, but he's important, where he's the one that's also trying to tell Joaquin like, well, yeah, the blacks hate the Mexicans, so I mean, you know, all these Black Lives Matter folk are going to really think that he did it. Yeah, yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, you know, he's the one helping them spin that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the moment where I kind of fell off a bit with Joaquin, and the only way to redeem him was like, yeah, like a giant shadowy black ops force shows up to gun him down when they think he's going to win the election by default, and he is truly anti-government and anti-tech. The Magic Carp, Golden Magic Carp, data center or whatever, is clearly just Meta. You know what I mean? It's clearly Facebook. The only thing that really boomed and thrived was the social online interactivity during the pandemic. So I do think it's quite fitting, and the best way to kind of wrap up the movie was having a severely over-the-top finale with these unseen shadowy forces actually showing up after, you know, because you start rolling your eyes 20, 30 minutes in when they keep going on about they don't want you to know they're manipulating you type talk. Because, you know, growing up in a small town, especially, and you were in a small town during the pandemic too, you drive by some, you know, theylied.ca, freedom convoy type things on the side of the road, and became less and less cringy as time went on. But you do get tired of it. You get tired of being reminded that that's an archetype in our society. And in this movie, by having a real big bad show up, so you, the audience, know, you know, he wasn't wrong. There are powers that are at, you know, out of all of our knowing that are ruining society, only for him to end up in his position where he gets what he wanted. But it's like the monkey's paw, where, yeah, you're the mayor of the town, your mom's proud of you, you get the bigger house, like everything kind of worked out, but he has literally no agency. He's like a quadriplegic with brain damage, and he's all messed up. And the sad thing is when his, you know, mom shows him the video of like Emma Stone at the Austin Butler rally. She's got a chest piece tattoo, and she's like 8 months pregnant,
yeah.
And he's just like weeping through an inaudible, paralyzed neck mouth type move, and you're like, God damn. I thought him wheezing while in the gunfight was hard to watch. Him weeping as a quadriplegic was like, what an ending. You know? So and then his mom gets in bed with the caretaker. It's like, damn, that guy's even banging your mom.
Well, they all get in bed in the you know, like that was the funnier, like the extra,
and that's also like
she gets into bed with Joaquin, and you're like, what the fuck? And then the caretaker gets in bed with her and Joaquin, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Thematically, everybody's in bed with each other, and there's so many things that are out of your control. Yeah, man. No, I dug the ending because it made me go back to feeling sympathy for a guy who does some pretty despicable stuff, even though he was almost always pretty much like in the right interest, but with maybe the wrong point of view. And at the end, when his point of view was exaggerated, it was like, holy shit. So.
Yeah, I think, well, part of that is, like, I feel like you would have fallen off board a little earlier with that realization on, like, actually how bad it is that he said that about Emma Stone, especially with the fact that it's not true, right? That's where I immediately was like, fuck, man, like, well, you know.
I kind of believe he was so petty that he was, like, always truly jealous that Pedro Pascal was, like, somebody important to his wife. And I took away not so much that hidden implication that maybe it was her father as her abuser, but I always kind of took it away like she wanted more. And maybe Pedro's point, it was like, oh, she was obsessed with me, and I never did anything.
This is one of the parts that I've read a lot about, and like, again, why I think testament to why a second viewing is needed, because there was some of it that I missed too. But it's very clear that basically nothing happened. Like, she was weird because of the issues she was going through at home with her dad. And
Oliver fucked up
so
art
Pedro
too.
just kind of left that. Like I believe that, and I believe what I've read too since of like things I might have missed with that. Like, I do believe Pedro in that situation was probably like all right, but the fact that, like, you know, again, you don't know, but like clearly this fiction, like, because even Joe asks her that question about like, was it your dad, right? Was it your dad? And stuff like that, and she just kind of sleeps through that. But he has that realization. Like, he knows the answer, or you can, you know, reasonably assume he knows that answer by asking her the question. Which, again, also, like, we're ignoring this whole part, too, where they have a literal fucking shrine of that dad in their house. Right? Like, that big painting of the sheriff on the wall, right? Imagine if you're...
I
Emma
always thought that was
Stone's
Joaquin's
character.
dad. I thought that was Joaquin's
No.
dad.
It's so it was her dad, but he was also the sheriff, and Joaquin was the deputy when he was sheriff.
Gotcha.
So
Because
again,
I'm not gonna lie, because I'm just a simple folk. But when I was first viewing the cinematic movie, when I was first watching the movie Eddington, I definitely thought that when Joaquin crawled into bed with her after showing the mom in the living room, the age gap, or maybe because I think Emma Stone's very attractive and Joaquin typically isn't. When he like leaned over and like kissed her in the bed at the very kind of beginning of the movie, I was like, oh, I thought that was his daughter for a minute. The way she has all that kind of creepy, weird art. The way his mom, I thought that was his wife in the living room, and they're having a marital spat because of her being rat. So I'm not even gonna lie, I was a little bit unaware of the familiar dynamic there.
Yeah.
Who was, and it took me a while to kind of, because even now I was like, oh, I thought that was his dad, and he was filling his shoes, not,
no,
it was her. I knew it was her mom after like a few more lines of dialogue, because they always call each other mom, like, the more southern, more, he doesn't go mom-in-law or Patty or whatever her name was. He's like, ma, so, but no, the family dynamic I think was really interesting, and it just, I'm glad you clarified. I feel like you and I, like, you're telling me this story that went over my head, and I feel like I'm helping you process your almost grief watching this movie a little bit more, because it was a lot to unpack. It's a therapy session, this episode.
This is the kind of movie that I love that we do this because this is the kinds of things where, like, it's great to like talk about a movie, enjoy, and whatever else, but like I love a movie that makes you, like, I always talk about how I like make movies that make me feel, and that's true, but this one makes me think, and that's good too.
That's worse.
And yeah,
my brain done overheated.
That's what the controlling government wants you to know.
I was gonna wear a tinfoil hat instead of a cowboy hat, but I'm like, that's too much.
I could have done that. I should have done that in hindsight. You should have hit me with that next time.
I don't want to
if you find low energy, if you find low effort ways for me to dress up, I'm more than happy to do it.
I was gonna say wear a mask, but then it would just be like, so today we're not getting political talking about the pandemic.
Dude, and people would see me in a mask. I wouldn't want to have to deal with the comments on that.
Well, with your blue mic and my red mic, I think people already know where we stand, brother.
Oh God. Well, but okay, so I want to get back to this ending because
let's wrap up the ending.
It's funny to me the way that you kind of clarified that you're like, oh, and like it turns out his kind of conspiracy about this was correct, and like you just said, you outed your own politics, but I do think that the mirror, like ironically, I think a lot of that ending really brings a mirror to what you want to believe. And I kind of had this instinct when we first got out of the movie, because you said like, whoa, oh yeah, like it confirms that his, suspicions, his conspiracies were correct. And when I got out of the theater, my friend Sergio watched it, and he was like, oh, I thought the movie was implying that those were like, it was like a right-wing, like, psyop operation, that they were the Antifa people that show up at the end and do all the shooting and all of that. It was a right-wing psyop to like incite division and whatever else. And so
I just said the powers that be. I didn't put a stance
right,
on
right,
it.
right.
I said the
but they definitely show in that, because they're flying in the private jet, but as it pans through the jet, they have like fuck the police or whatever. They have a bunch of like Black Lives Matter slogans and all of this written around, and they're the same person or people, that are shown as like shooting cops and some of the other news footage and stuff that Joaquin looks at.
Did you find that cell phone that he pulls up from the explosion to be a little bit like I think in a worse movie you'd go, oh, they spell it out for you, because I still don't feel like I got spelled out enough, you know what I mean? Like, he finds the phone in the blow up explosion and it's all fucked up, and he's looking at it and he's like, the camera roll is like the videos and like the drone footage, like all the stuff that essentially he found the social media content creator for that mass shadowy group lost his phone in the shootout near the end. And I was like, oh, I mean, it helps explain things for me, the simpleton, but what are the odds? Like, eardrum blown out, limping, wheezing. Joaquin's like, well, this is important.
He did shoot that guy that dropped that, right? That's why he ran away, because there was the dude filming it, and then Joaquin, who's a great shot, pegs him from further away than he probably expected. So I mean,
like that they made him that. I like that they made him like a good shooter, because he's essentially a failure as a man and a sheriff. At least he's a good shot, so you believe, oh, he earned his job at some point. He's not a total nepo hire like I was thinking for a lot of the movie. maybe he was good at being the sheriff, and this flip turned everything upside down, where the power is now shifted to somebody that had a figurehead job. To yeah.
Well, he has the archetype in himself. Like, he believes himself to be that, like,
to be the law,
the cowboy, like the macho, the law, like energy. But it's ironic.
Sweater vest Pedro.
And this is something I want to relook at, is that I noticed it a couple times, and so once I really looked, but then I didn't notice it again after, was that normally you see cops will hold their hands over their gun.
I noticed this too. He's always got it.
It's over his phone. And so, like, I was like, because I was looking, I'm like, wait, no, his gun's on the other side, and he's always got it, like, over his phone. And which, again, like, there's been a whole thing made of, like, oh, this is a Western where the guns are swapped with phones, and, like, I thought that was a very literal representation
Sometimes
of that.
It's
but,
both.
like, exactly, and it's emblematic of, like, we'll get there. It's emblematic of, like, all of the kind of other themes, like, going into the movie. But I think, like, one of an interview I watched with Ari Aster where he said, like, you can look at that final sequence, and you can get from it what you want. There can be an interpretation of that sequence that says he was right all along. It is this big Antifa conspiracy. Or you could also look at it as, like, a satire of the concept, right? Like, it's now going into satirical absurdity of, like, that there is just Antifa soldiers being flown around the country to go wreak havoc and whatever else.
Like Red Dawn style into all these towns with cell phones and handguns and grenades.
Exactly, and then there's, like, anything in between those, of course, which is, like, where I think Sergio's, like, initial take, which he said he's since, like, once he thought about it more, is on board with that, but, like, that was his initial take when we came out of the movie. And for my initial take, which again is wild, we kind of all had different kind of interpretations of that, was my thing for that ending was definitely, I was more on that corporatist side, that, like, the fact that they're in a private jet, like, that is really not necessarily the left-right conspiracy of it was Antifa or whatever. Like, that was just the rich and powerful weaponizing a situation to create that, right?
That's kind of what I meant when I said, like, powers that be and whatnot. Right. Like, because, like, when he talks about, like, you're being manipulated, that statement is probably the most true. I didn't mean it like, in the psyop way, like Sergio. I genuinely meant it like, the logo on the jet isn't like a Black Lives Matter fist, or is it like some sort of military Reaper looking thing?
Yeah,
it's a poorly drawn globe, or globe with, like, hands encompassing it. And that was the part where, it really felt like there was, again, people to control the narrative, not a political side, but people who are in control at the highest level, sending these Red Dawn type figures into these towns to sow discourse. Again, I think the eeriest part of all of it too is when you see the drone and you're like, oh, this is a saw trap. This is a saw trap finale, and then it turns into a Rambo finale, and then it turns into what movies do end with people fully paralyzed watching the worst things that happen to them? Like, because I'm like, I can't think of a third way to do it, because that last quarter, the last fifth of the movie is it's radical. Like, it is. Would you call it a slow burn, or do you feel like it's pretty consistently tense with a big climax in the end? Because it starts very slow compared to the end, but the whole thing is pretty enjoyable.
Once it started,
like
basically once the explosion goes off, I felt like it was pretty steadily going up. Oh, but like the thing is, the movie felt more like this, and then in that, once the explosion moment happens, the whole thing relatively shoots way up. But I think, like,
bleep when he shoots Pedro and the homeless guy, and then it goes back down a little bit, and then it goes way back up.
We gotta talk about the Pedro bit, because I thought that was surprised me. Because, like, I thought, like, by going at the homeless guy, I was like, okay, he's taking his anger out on him. And so, like, I expected, okay, like, once that happened, I'm like, okay, so that's him, like, doing that. I did not immediately then expect to do that, and I thought that sequence was so effective. Like, it made me, like, startle a little bit, because, like, he's sitting there, and again, just, like, Ari Aster, man, like, he's got chops. And when he's sitting in his chair, you see the flash, and it's so subtle. It's so subtle. If you don't know that it's there the first time, it just was like that. And I kind of remember like
jump
darting
scare.
it is, because I dart my eyes to the light because I'm like, what the fuck was that? And then and it goes through. And so then you're looking for the flash when the kid comes out, and you see it again, and you're like, oh my fucking God.
And then it hits the
and
wood.
Then it misses, and then you see the flash again, and then it connects. And I was like, so that sequence was, I thought, brilliant, like, and super effective and sudden to me. Like, I did not expect that, and maybe I should have, but I didn't see that coming right after. And so yeah, like that part was brilliantly executed. But to go back to the kind of the ending in this Antifa or whatever group, like this is where, again, like there are reasonable-ish enough interpretations. Like, yeah, if you factor in creator intent, maybe that would change it. But like again, there's people, like I've read these takes where people were like, it was a right-wing politician or like right-wing, you know, money people that were staging, because they show all of the characters that you can see their skin color of this like Antifa
try
group
to notice
are
skin
all
color.
white.
I was really
they
looking.
were all white. And
Okay.
so like I thought that, but then I've read other people's stuff that said the same thing. But like, so I've read interpretations where that, like, you know, it was this right wing thing that they were hiring these guys to just sow chaos in the name of Antifa, to sow division. And then there was like the argument where like the left wing, you know, like George Soros types were funding it to actually sow that, like, because they agree and fuck them, and it like did the same thing but with the intent. And then there's the other reading of like it's a politicless, you know, entity, like that you said, the globe in the hand. Like, it's just, they're not political, they're power. And that's like like they're not, they will use whatever politics of the day they need to make
Social
sure they can build
media
solid gold.
mercenaries.
Yeah, exactly. Solid gold Magikarp's friggin' data center or whatever the hell it was called.
Dude,
so
hold
like,
on. Do you think that the meta company being called Solid Gold Magikarp or whatever was a reference to the skyrocketing value of Pokemon cards during the pandemic? This is a real hot take I want to focus on.
I genuinely was kind of still, and I still haven't read anything about that makes me feel any different. I did find that name baffling when they show it like right at the beginning, and
it
I was
sounds
like,
a little bit Chinese, to be
what?
fair. I didn't want to get into that, but like that does sound like a
I
Chinese.
have no idea what the intent, and then all of the stuff I've read and listened to, no one's really addressed that. But like, I remember when the movie ended, Nick was literally, because it also ends on that shot, like while the credits roll, of their neon
the data
sign
center
or whatever.
Yeah.
And Nick's like, why the hell did they name it after a Pokemon? I'm like, I couldn't tell you, dude. I have no idea. And that's one thing I do not have a theory on. I'm also not versed in the Pokemon sphere of all that. But
I have a bit on that, but I'll save that for my other podcast where I talk about collecting trading cards. No, I'll
trading card podcast.
It's something about fortune
I think,
with Magikarps.
I think for me on that, like, again, the ending, when it ended, I was just overwhelmed. I was so overwhelmed. I was so baffled. All of these things I'm saying about the ending came, like, again, I'm 3 days removed from seeing it, have come since then. Because when it ended, I was just like, what the fuck? And then, like, the Joaquin thing. And that's where, though, I think ultimately, to wrap up my part on the ending here, is that, you know, how Joaquin literally becomes just a soulless, like, he's a husk that is trotted out as the mayor and all of this stuff, and his mother-in-law is his mouthpiece and is seemingly running the show and everything. And again, like, he was against that, but now is presiding over it. You know, Pedro Pascal's handler guy, like I said, is now up there with Joaquin as the mayor.
He remains in power the whole time.
Exactly.
Which, again,
and I think
powers that be.
I think, and you can take this so much further, and I'm sure other people will, and I don't feel like that's for a political podcast, not a movie podcast. But to really dive into the kind of like what this really is about in a core level for me is almost kind of trying to highlight the irrelevancy of the left-right divide when the people above are only considered the only politics they care about is power. They have no moral guiding principles. They have no fundamental values that they treasure or cherish or value. It's just simply power. one of the things that kind of reinforced this for me was Ari Aster, another interview I watched since I watched it, where he talks about how, like, a lot of the conventional right wing, again, very generically used term, talking points are 1960s liberal talking points about freedom of speech and expression back in the US, especially, where that was going up against like the Nixon era and then bleeding into the Reagan era in the 80s, where, you know, it was left-wing people that were really touting free speech. And so he kind of highlights the irony of that twist. And it does feel like kind of a commentary on this. Again, we're so focused on the left and the right and this value and that value, but when the people above don't care about any of those, and they're immediately willing to just kind of use any of those things to just serve their ultimate purposes. So yeah, I think that's really my takeaway from it. Again, we could probably go for 4 hours on this, but I'm definitely curious what other people think. If you've listened this far, like, you know, sign off in the comments, let us know, because I would be really curious. And like I said, Brandon said it's a hard recommendation. I understand why. It's a movie that I don't think anyone's going to come up and be like, I love that. That was so fun and enjoyable.
My favorite film.
I think it's worth a watch, and the more I've sat with it, the more I've really enjoyed it, and I think, you know, that's kind of my final take, I guess. I would say on Eddington.
Yeah, I think I'll wrap it up too. I was going to talk about like what happens to Joaquin, other than like I think we talked about how he ends up, but I think I'll let that be for people who really want to go see it. I love what happens with the kid and his social justice brand, how he becomes a bit of he switches sides. Love it all. Again, hard recommend. Nobody's really safe in it. I'm really glad we went from a very political movie like Superman 2025 to such a totally not political movie about the 2020 pandemic. So, yeah, it was a rough watch, but I think it's important to watch this and hold the mirror up, because otherwise, yeah. I want to round out talking about the theater experience, especially that ending I was just talking to. I think it was awesome that so many people laughed at that. I felt like I had like a crowd, bottom right, top left. I was in the middle, and you could tell politically where they were based on how they laughed at certain jokes. And in the end, everybody laughed where, you know, the kid ends up switching, you know, political beliefs after the crazy ending where you don't believe what happens.
Marjorie Taylor Greene picture, and he's like, "Oh, Big Mike." I fucking died, dude. I was laughing so hard at that part.
I almost wanted to like clip that and be like, "Dude, it's us, bro. It's us right now." But yeah, I want to say thanks for being so brave to record this episode with me. I feel like even bigger YouTubers are sitting with this because they don't want to tackle this. So I'm glad we could chat it up. But yeah. To end out on a great theater experience. The one downside was somebody in my theater, bottom right, you don't know where they stand politically, but I do. They kept taking photos during the whole movie at different like title scenes like this where you have the standoff with Pedro and Joaquin. The very end, it was really funny. She pulls her phone up as it says Eddington, and she goes to take a photo and just see this like flash, and the screen goes black, and it's just the flash going off. He's like, and everybody laughed and pointed at her after. It felt really good. So please, for the love of God, if you go see a movie, even this movie, don't pull your phone out. Do not take photos, still images, and post them on your story. Take a photo of the ticket, take a photo of the poster. Don't take photos during the movie. You're not that cool. Thanks for watching.